Hello. My name is Solen Moro, and 3 weeks ago, my mother threw a plate of meatloaf at me and screamed, "Get out," in front of a neighbor. That was before she forged my signature, before she tried to evict me from the house my grandmother left in my name. So yes, if you're here for something calm and sweet, you're in the wrong story. Because tonight, it all started with a dinner. The table shimmered under soft yellow light, the kind of light that made every plate look like a memory. My mother had always believed in presentation, fresh flowers, polished forks, and a bottle of wine too expensive for our means. It was supposed to be a celebration. Isolde had just landed another online partnership, and my parents decided we all needed to toast her success. When I arrived, my name wasn't on the invitation sitting on the mantel. Each card was printed in gold, Varela, Corwin, Isolde, and then mine, scribbled in blue ink at the bottom. Just Sol. No dear, no flourish, no sign that I belonged there. I stared at it longer than I should have before Mom appeared behind me with that tone she used when she wanted to remind me of my place. "Dinner's getting cold, sweetheart. We don't want to wait all night." The word sweetheart always came wrapped in warning. I followed her to the dining room. Every chair was full except the one they always left for me at the far end, half a step outside the circle of conversation. Dad poured himself wine before anyone else. Mom lifted her glass. "To new beginnings," she said. The clink of crystal rang too loud in my ears. I smiled on cue, but it felt rehearsed. Halfway through dinner, while everyone laughed about something Isolde had said, Mom's voice cut through like the edge of a broken plate. "Your father and I talked," she said, her fork tapping the rim of her plate. "Since you're working now, it's time you paid your share." I looked up, the sound of chewing stopped around me. "My share?" "Rent," she clarified. 12,000 a year. It's only fair." At first, I thought she was joking. The wine must have gone to her head. But when I looked at her face, there was no trace of humor. Even Dad kept his eyes on his napkin, folding it again and again. "Mom," I said slowly, "you're asking me to pay rent in my own house?" She sipped her wine and smiled that teacher's smile she used to correct children. "You live here, don't you? Heat, water, groceries, they cost money." Dad murmured, "Everyone contributes, Sol." His tone was thin, as if he wanted to disappear into it. I felt my hands tremble beneath the table. The words tasted like dust. "I already contribute. I pay the utilities, the taxes." Mom interrupted, calm but sharp. "That was your choice. Don't act like a martyr." Then, louder, as if she wanted the neighbors to hear, "If you don't pay, then get out." The room froze. Even Isolde's fork hung midair. Somewhere outside, a car passed, headlights flickering through the window. No one spoke. The smell of roasted chicken and garlic turned thick and metallic. In that silence, something inside me slipped loose. I could hear my own pulse, steady and cold. They didn't forget me. They erased me. I tried to laugh, but it caught in my throat. "You're serious," I said. "Of course I'm serious," Mom replied. "You're not a child anymore." Dad added, "It's about responsibility." That word, responsibility, had followed me my whole life. I paid the bills when Dad lost his job. I bought groceries when Mom maxed out her card. I stayed when everyone else left. And still, I was the one asked to prove my worth. I pushed my plate away. "Responsibility," I repeated quietly, almost tenderly. "You mean obedience." Mom's eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone." "I am," I said. "That's why you can still hear me." The tension thickened until the chandelier seemed to hum. Isolde cleared her throat, the peacekeeper as always. "Maybe we should talk about this later." Mom ignored her. "We'll expect your first payment by the end of the month." Dad reached for the salt but missed. "Your mother's right. It's only fair." Fair. I wanted to laugh at the word. I looked at each of them, my mother, perfect posture, my father, small and tired, my sister, pretending not to enjoy the show. "This house was left to me," I said, my voice steady. "But tonight, I see it doesn't belong to me at all." Mom blinked, surprised that I didn't shout. "Don't be dramatic." "I'm not," I said softly. "I'm observant." The knife clinked against my plate as I stood. My chair scraped the floor, an ugly sound that felt right. "Enjoy dinner," I murmured. "Where do you think you're going?" she demanded. "To remember who I am," I said. "And maybe where I stand." No one followed me. The air outside the dining room felt heavier than the air inside. I walked down the hallway past family photos, every one of them centered around Isolde. My own face was there, but slightly turned, half in shadow, like I'd been cropped out by accident. Or maybe on purpose. In the kitchen, the leftovers were already cooling. I poured myself a glass of water, the silence pressing against my ears. I could hear the faint echo of their voices in the dining room, low, deliberate. I didn't need to make out the words to know they were about me. I thought about Agatha, my grandmother, the woman who built this home with her own hands. She used to say, family can't own what love already paid for. I wondered what she'd say now. My reflection in the kitchen window looked unfamiliar, older, maybe harder. I set the glass down and walked to the living room. The invitations from the dinner sat in a neat pile on the coffee table. Mine still had a stain from my fingerprint on the corner. I turned it over. The back was blank. I wrote a single line on it with a pen I found in the drawer, "I'm not renting my place in this family." Then I folded it, placed it under the crystal bowl at the center of the table, and left the room. As I passed the dining room again, Mom was laughing at something Isolde said, her voice ringing high and bright. She didn't look up. Neither did Dad. I paused in the doorway. My throat burned, but I swallowed it down. The smell of lemon polish filled the air, the same scent Agatha used when she cleaned before holidays. It should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt like a warning. I wanted to say something that would pierce through their indifference, something final and unforgettable. But all I managed was a whisper. "I hope the rent's worth what you've lost." No one answered. I took my coat, opened the front door, and stepped into the cool night. The porch light flickered once, as if hesitating to let me go. The street beyond was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels deliberate. I walked slowly, each step steady. My heart was a dull drum in my chest, beating not with anger but with something colder, clarity. The kind that hurts more than rage ever could. Under the breath of the night air, I realized this wasn't about rent. It was about belonging. About a family that needed me to stay small so they could feel big. I exhaled, softly, slowly, gently. "They didn't forget me," I whispered again. "They erased me." And somewhere between that house and the corner streetlight, I began counting backward, 3 months, 2 weeks, 24 hours, until the day I would stop being erased. I didn't go back to the table. I walked straight upstairs, past the photos on the staircase, every frame filled with smiles that didn't quite include me. The house felt louder when I didn't speak. My steps on the hardwood floor sounded like they didn't belong there, like I was trespassing in a place I was born into. My room was dim. The lamp flickered as if unsure whether to work for me. I didn't take off my shoes. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the voices floating up from the dining room. Laughing. As if nothing had happened. As if telling your daughter to pay rent or get out was just another line in the family script. They were good at moving on. I was the only one who ever stood still long enough to feel the bruise forming. The drawer next to my bed stuck for a second before it gave in. Inside was a receipt. Grocery store. My name was on the card. They'd asked me to grab a few things earlier that week, never offered to pay me back. They never did. I turned the receipt over in my hand. It felt heavier than it should have. Like it carried the weight of every small thing I'd ever paid for and never mentioned. I opened my laptop, the screen lighting up my face. I pulled up the bank app. A recurring transfer popped up on the screen, monthly, automatic, sent from my account to cover the internet bill. $109.47. Every month for 2 years. I hovered over the cancel button. It wasn't rage I felt. It was clarity. A cold, still kind of knowing. Click. That money would stay with me now. That silence, they could have it. I didn't need to pay for their connection anymore. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. The fan overhead clicked softly, rhythmically, like a metronome keeping time with thoughts I didn't want to say out loud. My mind wandered. Years ago, I had an offer, Seattle. A mid-level management role at a bank downtown. The recruiter said, "You're everything they're looking for. You're overqualified, actually." But Mom had cried. "If you leave, who's going to help your father? Agatha trusted you to stay. Don't you remember what she said before she died?" I remembered. "Keep the house warm," Agatha had whispered. "Keep it alive." So I stayed. When Dad had his surgery and Mom forgot to pay the electric bill, I handled it. When Isolde bounced between failed boyfriends and came home with just one suitcase, I welcomed her. When Mom missed her mortgage deadlines, on a house that wasn't even hers, I paid them. Quietly. Reliable, Dad always called me. "You've always been the quiet one," he said once, when I didn't argue as Mom handed me a used porcelain tea set wrapped in faded Christmas paper. The tag was still on it. "To Isolde, with love." Mom smiled as if it didn't matter. "You like old things anyway." I didn't say anything. I just smiled back and tucked the gift under my arm, the way I had learned to tuck away everything. That night, I brought it up to my room, sat on the floor, and unwrapped it. One of the cups was chipped. I ran my thumb along the crack. I didn't cry. I hadn't cried in years, not since Agatha passed and Mom whispered at the funeral, "Don't start. We need to be strong for everyone else." The chipped cup was still in my drawer. I held it now. It felt like a symbol I hadn't chosen. I set it down gently on the nightstand. Slowly. Tenderly. I reached for my phone. Opened a message to myself. I didn't know why. Maybe I needed to say it to someone, even if that someone was me. They don't see me. Not because I'm invisible. But because they chose to never look. I hit send. My room had never felt colder. Not because of the temperature, but because I'd begun to realize I had built my own prison. One favor at a time. One sacrifice at a time. I laid down on the bed, fully dressed. The laughter downstairs faded into the television. Something about that made it worse. They weren't grieving. They were digesting. I thought about the tea set. About Agatha. About the words she'd once whispered to me after a long day when I'd helped her clean the porch. "Don't let anyone take your soft heart and use it like a dish rag." I'd laughed then. But now, it stung. I closed my eyes and imagined what Seattle might have felt like. A small apartment. Silence of my own choosing. Bills paid by me, for me. No one asking. No one assuming. My breathing slowed. My chest rose gently, evenly. Healing didn't arrive suddenly. It happened softly, step by step. I opened my eyes. Stared at the ceiling. I wasn't erased anymore. I was simply waiting to reappear. And that reappearance would not come with noise. It would come with signatures, with numbers, with proof. They wanted accountability? I was about to show them exactly what that meant. 2 days passed before I realized the house had gone quiet, not peaceful quiet, but the kind that hums beneath your skin. I stayed late at the bank, finishing paperwork I didn't need to. Anything to avoid the silence waiting at home. That morning, I sat in my car outside the building, fingers tracing the steering wheel, replaying the dinner in my head. There'd been no text from Mom. No apology. Not even a knock on my door. The family had decided pretending nothing happened was easier than admitting it did. My phone buzzed. A notification from the family group chat, a digital space where I mostly existed as background noise. I opened it without thinking. A message blinked on the screen. It was from Mom. Short. Practical. Let her stay a few more months. Once she's signed the rental agreement, we'll move fast. And just like that, it vanished. Deleted. But not before I took a screenshot. My hand didn't even shake. The betrayal was too organized to hurt right away. It sat there, heavy and deliberate. My own mother, negotiating the terms of my eviction like I was a tenant who overstayed her welcome. By the time I drove home, I wasn't angry. I was awake. When I stepped through the door, the air smelled of detergent and lavender, the same scent she always used before company came over. She hummed from the kitchen, as if we hadn't torn the fabric of our relationship 2 nights ago. "Hi, sweetheart," she said without turning. "You're late. I thought you were working from home today." Her tone was so light it almost sounded kind. "You sit my bait down. I had things to finish." "Good," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. "It's good to stay busy." I wanted to ask if she sent the message. I wanted to watch her lie. But something in me preferred the truth of her silence. That evening, I needed to print a statement for my accountant, so I used the family laptop. The machine was old, sluggish, the kind of thing no one backed up but everyone relied on. While I searched for the file, I found a spreadsheet, bright green tab labeled House Budget 2024. I clicked it open. Rows of numbers, color-coded, efficient. My mother's handwriting turned into formulas. Halfway down the page, under projected income, a line read. Solène, $1,000 per month, contribution. Beside it, a note in italics, "Will signed by Q2." They'd already spent my money before they ever asked for it. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. "They've turned me into a line item," I whispered. "A calculation they can spend." I printed the sheet, hole-punched it, and slid it into a new folder I bought the next morning. On the tab, I wrote one word in black ink: evidence. In the days that followed, I stopped paying for things that weren't mine. The streaming subscription, gone. The grocery delivery account, cancelled. Each click felt like cutting another invisible string tied around my neck. Dad asked why the internet was slow one night. I told him maybe it was time to pay for his own plan. He blinked, confused, like he couldn't understand the concept. "Your mother said you'd handle it," he murmured. "She says a lot of things," I answered quietly. At work, I hid behind normal tasks, loan approvals, polite conversations, coffee breaks. But every quiet moment replayed that message. "Once she's signed the rental agreement, we'll move fast." Move fast to where? To what? I remembered being 16, overhearing my mother tell my aunt, "Sol's dependable, not brilliant. She'll stay close. That's good for us." I hadn't realized then that she wasn't praising me, she was making plans. I started to see every act of kindness for what it had been: strategy. The next evening, she called out from the living room, "Sol, can you check the mail? There's something from the insurance company." Her voice dripped with normalcy, the way people use small talk to hide crimes. I brought her the envelope. She smiled. "Thank you, honey. You're such a help." That word again, help. Never daughter. Never equal. I stood there, holding the mail like proof. "Mom," I said carefully, "do you think I'm selfish?" She looked up, surprised. "Where's that coming from?" "I just wonder if you think I've done enough for this family." Her smile tightened. "This isn't about enough. It's about fairness. You've had it easy, Sol. Some of us didn't get a free ride." A free ride. On the mortgage I'd paid. On the bills I'd covered. She turned back to the mail, dismissing me like she'd swat away a fly. "You take things too personally." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I nodded. "You're right," I said softly. "That's what makes me reliable." That night, I opened the folder again. The green tab glowed under the desk lamp. The spreadsheet, the screenshot, the receipts, they were starting to look less like proof and more like a plan. I could almost hear Agatha's voice, calm and sure. "Keep the house warm, Solène. But if they turn it cold, lock the door." I closed my eyes, letting the memory settle. Healing wasn't always gentle, it came through clarity, through choosing not to explain yourself anymore. Before bed, I called Ellison. He picked up on the second ring. "You okay?" he asked. His voice always sounded steady, like someone who'd already survived something worse. "I'm fine," I said. "Just have a legal question." "That doesn't sound good." "It's hypothetical," I lied. "How hard is it to evict your own parents?" The line went quiet for a moment. I heard him exhale. "It depends," he said slowly. "Depends who's on the deed." I sat on my bed long after the call ended, Ellison's words repeating like a pulse in my head, "Depends who's on the deed." The sentence wouldn't let go. It followed me into every room, into every shadow of the house I once believed was safe. Something felt off the next morning. It wasn't just the silence, or the forced cheerfulness of my mother's humming downstairs. It was subtler, like the air had been rearranged while I was gone. I opened my desk drawer to grab a pen, but the contents looked different. Too neat. My papers, once stacked in the order I kept them, were shuffled. Receipts I'd saved were missing, folders slightly misaligned. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Then I saw it, a manila envelope that hadn't been there before. It was labeled in my mother's careful cursive, "Lease Agreement, Solène M." My stomach tightened. I pulled it out slowly. Inside, a document, 3 pages, notarized, dated. It looked official enough to fool anyone. The signature at the bottom, mine. Or at least a version of it. Tilted, smooth, too practiced. I stared at it for a long time before holding it against the window light. The pen strokes shimmered faintly where ink had been traced over. Whoever did it, they took their time. I checked the landlord line. Varela di Moro. My mother. My hands went cold. Downstairs, I could hear her moving around the kitchen, cheerful as ever. The sound of clinking dishes. The scrape of a chair against tile. The rhythm of someone perfectly at peace. I took out my phone and snapped a picture. Then another. The light glinted off the paper like it wanted to hide the truth. When I walked into the hallway, the lamp flickered, then went out. I touched the switch. Nothing. I tried another outlet. Still dead. The rest of the house glowed normally, kitchen, hallway, even the guest room. Only my space sat in the dark. I stepped downstairs, document in hand. Mom was sitting at the counter, drinking tea as if she hadn't just committed fraud. "Morning," she said, "too bright. Sleep well?" "The power's out in my room," I replied. "Oh." She waved a hand, not even glancing up. "We've cut electricity to unused areas. Conservation thing. You know how bills add up." "Unused?" I repeated. She smiled softly. "You're barely here lately." My throat burned, but I swallowed the anger. She looked at me like she always did, sweet, patient, pretending concern while tightening the leash. "Where'd you get this?" I placed the folder on the counter. She blinked. "What's that?" "You tell me." She reached for it with slow hands, the kind people use when they already know they're guilty. "Oh, that old thing," she said after a beat. "Just a draft I've been playing with." "Don't be dramatic." "A draft with my forged signature?" Her eyes flashed. "Don't accuse me of something ridiculous, Solène. You always overreact. It's exhausting." I wanted to scream. Instead, I took a quiet breath. "You signed my name," I said, steady. "That's a crime." She chuckled softly. "It's a misunderstanding. You really need to calm down. Everything I do for this family." That phrase, "for this family," landed like a curse. She used it for every lie she ever told, every manipulation she dressed as love. I walked back upstairs before she could twist the story again. The darkness of my room welcomed me. I didn't bother changing the bulb. I sat on the edge of the bed and thought about Agatha, how she used to call my mother ambitious. I'd been too young to understand what she meant. Ambition could build. But in Mom, it devoured. I opened my laptop and attached the photos of the lease to an email for Ellison. I didn't write anything in the body. I didn't have to. By evening, my phone buzzed. One new message: "Got it. Don't worry. Keep everything documented. Don't touch the original." I sat staring at the text until the screen dimmed. Downstairs, laughter drifted up, Mom talking to Dad about weekend plans. The sound made my skin prickle. When the lights flickered again, I decided I wouldn't sleep there that night. At the bank, the lounge was quiet, the hum of machines steady. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling tiles, the smell of old carpet oddly comforting. For the first time in days, no one could touch my things. I filed a police report online. "Possible forgery and identity misuse," I typed. The form didn't ask who it was, but I filled in her name anyway. The next morning, I came home early. The sun poured through the windows, sharp and golden. The house looked perfect, too perfect. The illusion of peace covering something rotten. Dad was in the yard, pretending to fix the fence that never stayed straight. He waved awkwardly. "Your mother said you were working late again." I nodded. "Did she mention she cut my power?" He frowned. "Probably just a mistake. She said the wiring's old. She told me it was conservation." He sighed, the kind that meant he'd given up a long time ago. "Don't start, Sol. You know how she gets." Yes, I knew. I knew better than anyone. Inside, Mom was wiping the counter. She looked up and smiled. "Morning. Want coffee?" "No," I said. "I filed a report." Her hand froze mid-wipe. "A report for what?" "For the fake lease." The cloth in her hand twisted. "You're being ridiculous." "Maybe. But now it's official." The mask slipped then, just a fraction. Her lips tightened, and her eyes flicked to the envelope still sitting on the table where I'd left it. "You always did like drama," she said. "Drama is when someone pretends," I replied. "I'm done pretending." I left her standing there, her face pale under the morning light. Upstairs, I packed a small bag, just clothes, the deed copies, my laptop. The power was still off, but the quiet didn't bother me anymore. At noon, Ellison called. "I looked it up," he said. "You're on the deed." "She isn't." The words settled over me like soft rain. "So what does that mean?" I asked quietly. "It means you're the landlord, Sol." For a moment, I didn't answer. I just let the truth breathe. All these years, she'd made me feel like a guest, a burden, a mistake. But the house was mine. The air shifted in my lungs. I felt taller, steadier. Downstairs, the coffee maker clicked. The sound echoed through the house like a metronome marking time for something inevitable. For the first time, I wondered what it would feel like to finally say the words she'd thrown at me my entire life. Get out. The morning after Ellison's message, I woke to the smell of coffee and lemon polish again. It clung to the walls like a habit that wouldn't die. I stood in the hallway for a long moment, listening to the quiet rhythm of the house. My house. The thought should have brought peace. Instead, it carried the sharp edge of disbelief. Ownership meant nothing when everyone inside still acted like it belonged to someone else. By noon, Mom was knocking at my door, pretending everything was normal. There's a little gathering tonight, she said through the crack. A recognition event for retired teachers. It would mean a lot if you came. Family support and all that. I almost said no. But something in her tone, smooth, rehearsed, made me curious. Sure, I said finally. I'll come. At 6, the sky turned honeygold. The art center was full of chatter, glasses clinking, polite laughter. My mother thrived in rooms like this. She floated from conversation to conversation, her smile polished, her hand resting gently on people's arms as if she were blessing them. My father lingered near the food table, nodding at people without really seeing them. Isolde stood nearby in a dress I'd paid for, filming everything for her social feed. I stood at the back of the room, invisible and yet entirely present. It's strange how people can look straight through you even when they need you there to complete the picture. When the local paper's photographer approached, Mom's eyes lit up. Oh, perfect timing, she said. She turned to me and extended her arms. Come here, sweetheart. Family photo. Her voice was honey, her grip was iron. She pulled me close, the camera flashing. As the shutter clicked, she whispered, low enough for only me to hear. Smile. You ruined this for me, and I'll ruin you legally. The words hit like a slap dressed in silk. I froze, the flash still fading from my eyes. The warmth of her hand against my shoulder felt like a burn. I smiled for the next shot, mechanical, obedient. A fake piece for the world to see. When it was over, I stepped back. She kept smiling, waving, greeting more people. To everyone else, she looked like grace incarnate. To me, she looked like the architect of a cage built from manners and guilt. Later that night, I sat in the kitchen with my father. The event had drained me, and the house felt smaller, like the walls were listening. He was reading the paper, an actual newspaper, folded into neat squares. The print left faint smudges on his fingers. Dad, I said softly, do you care about what's happening here? He didn't look up. What do you mean? I mean this constant pretending. The contracts. The lies. He sighed, the sound long and tired. Your mother has sacrificed a lot, Solène. She's just trying to keep things together. She forged my name, Dad. He lowered the paper but didn't meet my eyes. She's under pressure. You know how she gets when she's stressed. Do you even believe me? He paused, then said quietly, this house wasn't yours to begin with. It came from your grandparents. You didn't earn it. The words didn't just hurt, they rearranged something in me. Like gravity had shifted and I couldn't find the ground. I stared at him, waiting for the flicker of regret that never came. I paid the bills, I said, voice barely above a whisper. I kept the lights on. I took care of you when you were sick. What more could I possibly earn? He looked back at the paper. Don't twist things. You've always been dramatic. And that was it, the last thread snapped. I wasn't fighting just my mother anymore. I was fighting their version of history. When I went upstairs, the house felt heavier. I opened my laptop. Notifications pinged. The photo from the event was already online. Mom had posted it. Caption, family means standing together. The picture showed her smile, perfect as ever. Dad's half grin. Isolde, radiant. And me, caught in mid-smile, half real, half trapped. I stared at it until the glow from the screen blurred. Then I opened the comment section. Old neighbors wrote things like, beautiful family, and, your daughters look just like you, Varela. Not a single one mentioned me by name. I deleted my social media that night. Not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. The noise didn't deserve to live where my peace might someday grow. As I shut the laptop, I heard voices downstairs. My mother's laughter, light, musical, floating up the stairwell. My father murmuring something I couldn't catch. For the first time, it didn't hurt. It just sounded distant, like a radio playing in another house altogether. I walked to my dresser and opened the bottom drawer. Inside, wrapped in a thin sheet of plastic, was the notarized copy of the deed. I pulled it out and unfolded it under the soft light of my lamp. My name was there in bold type. Clear, unambiguous. No one else's. I ran my fingers over the ink as though it might vanish if I blinked. It didn't. It was real. Solid. For a moment, I could almost hear Agatha's voice, calm, low, the way she spoke when she was sure of something. They can borrow your kindness, Solène, but not your backbone. I exhaled slowly. The document trembled just a little in my hands, but not from fear. From certainty. They'd spent years rewriting my place in this house, in this family, as if I were an accessory to their narrative. But the truth was right here, printed in black and white. This time, I wasn't going to let them speak for me. I folded the paper neatly, slid it back into its folder, and locked the drawer. The sound of the key turning was small but final. Outside, the wind pressed gently against the window, carrying the scent of rain. It felt like a beginning, quiet, deliberate. When I turned off the lamp, the darkness didn't feel empty. It felt earned. It was time to show them what ownership really looked like. The morning rain had just stopped when I pulled into the courthouse parking lot. My windshield was streaked with tiny silver drops, the kind that cling instead of falling away. I sat there for a moment, hands still on the steering wheel, breathing in the quiet. No trembling this time. No hesitation. Only that steady, unflinching calm that comes when you finally stop asking for permission. Inside, the courthouse smelled faintly of dust and paper, old stories pressed into manila folders. I followed the clerk's directions down a narrow hallway to a counter that looked worn from years of waiting hands. Filing for an eviction, I said, my voice even. The woman behind the glass nodded. She didn't ask for an explanation. She didn't have to. I laid the documents on the counter, the deed, the forged lease, every proof I had gathered. The clerk stapled, stamped, and slid them back to me for signatures. The sound of the stamp echoed softly against the tiled floor. It sounded final. When I stepped back outside, the air felt lighter. I wasn't sure if it was courage or exhaustion, but something inside me had shifted again. By evening, I was back home. The house looked the same, white trim, clean steps, the illusion of harmony, but I could feel the tension humming beneath the paint. My father's tools were scattered across the porch, as if he'd started fixing something and forgotten what it was. I needed one last thing before this was over. The original deed. Dad always kept old tax stuff in the basement cabinet. It was his world of disorganized control, files from decades ago, receipts from stores that no longer existed. The basement smelled of damp wood and the faint tang of rust. I dug through the drawers until I found it, folded, dusty, nearly buried beneath a stack of expired warranties. The paper felt fragile under my fingers, but the print was clear, property owner, Solène Morrow. Just me. No one else. I leaned against the cabinet, exhaling quietly. It wasn't just paper. It was truth, simple, irrefutable truth. Upstairs, I could hear the faint hum of my mother's voice, cheerful as ever, calling to Dad about dinner. I didn't answer. I folded the deed carefully, placed it in a protective sleeve, and carried it upstairs like something sacred. That night, I went to my room and dug out an old cassette player from the back of the closet. I hadn't touched it in years. The paint on the buttons had faded, but it still worked. I found the tape Agatha had given me at graduation, a recording she'd made on her kitchen radio. I pressed play. Her voice crackled through the static, soft but steady. If they ever forget who you are, she said, let the house remember. The room filled with her presence, the way she used to hum when she watered the plants, the sound of her bracelets clinking. I closed my eyes and let her words wash over me. It wasn't comfort I felt. It was permission. The next morning, I went to the fuse box in the garage. The switches lined up neatly, each one labeled in my father's handwriting. I flipped 3, my mother's room, Isolde's, and the living room. The rest I left alone. By noon, Mom was shouting from downstairs. Sol, the power's out again. The lights won't turn on. I came down slowly, holding a mug of coffee. It's a conservation thing, I said evenly. She blinked. Excuse me? Electricity's expensive. We shouldn't waste it on unused spaces. Her mouth opened, then closed. She couldn't decide whether to argue or perform patience. She settled on a sigh. You're acting strange lately. Maybe I finally learned from you, I replied softly. She frowned, confused by calm. People like her only understood resistance when it was loud. The afternoon stretched into an uneasy silence. Isolde stormed through the kitchen, complaining about not being able to charge her camera. Dad mumbled something about calling the electrician. I let them. In my room, I sat at my desk and began writing a list. Not of grievances, of boundaries. New locks. Separate utilities. Reclaim every key. I drove into town and bought 3 heavy brass locks from the hardware store. The clerk, an older man with kind eyes, asked if I needed help installing them. I told him I could manage. When I returned, Mom was in the living room, phone in hand, her tone light but sharp. You know, she said, this is really childish. Families share things. You're making everyone uncomfortable. I placed the locks on the counter. You're right, I said. Families share. But tenants don't. Her eyes widened. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer. Some truths didn't need explanation. That evening, I sat at my desk again, the new keys glinting beside my laptop. I called the utility companies, canceling every account under my name. Transfer of ownership, I said each time. The words felt good, precise, clean. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, I was ready. At 8:14 p.m., the knock came. Firm, professional. The process server stood at the door, envelope in hand. Delivery for Varela Moro, he said. Mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. That's me. He handed her the envelope, nodded, and left. She turned it over once, twice. What's this? I leaned against the doorway. You should read it. Her eyes darted across the page. The color drained from her face. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, quietly, you can't be serious. I'm very serious. Isolde appeared behind her, phone raised, recording the scene for her followers. Mom, what's going on? Nothing, Mom snapped, but her voice cracked. She dropped the envelope onto the counter like it burned her. Isolde zoomed in, whispering into the camera, my sister's lost it. I walked past them both, steady and silent. The kitchen smelled of lemon again, my mother's favorite weapon of normalcy. I turned back once. You have 30 days, I said. Mom stared at me, red-faced and trembling. You're doing this to your own family? I'm doing this to my tenants, I corrected gently. It's a business matter. The look she gave me was half fury, half disbelief. You'll regret this, Solène. You'll regret every bit of it. I smiled faintly. Maybe. But I'll do it in peace. Upstairs, I played Agatha's tape again. Her voice filled the air like a benediction. If they ever forget who you are, let the house remember. I sat by the window, the last light fading across the yard. Below, my mother was pacing the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, Isolde recording every movement. My father watched from the doorway, his silence finally catching up to him. I locked my door and rested my head against the frame. Gently, quietly, softly, I felt the shift. The house wasn't turning against me anymore. It was turning back toward me. I didn't hear the footsteps, but I knew they were there, creeping down the hallway, heavy with intention. Every movement below me had a rhythm now, a pattern I could predict. The house had become a quiet battlefield. One where smiles masked threats, and silence held more meaning than any scream. 48 hours had passed since the envelope was delivered. I'd expected shouting, maybe accusations. What I hadn't expected was how quickly my mother pivoted. She didn't storm up the stairs or tear the paper in half. She went online. By noon the next day, there it was. A photo from my childhood, me at 7 years old, holding Agatha's hand in front of the garden we planted together. My mother had cropped herself into the corner, smiling. The caption read, "The little girl who once held my heart now holds eviction papers. After all I sacrificed. After all we gave." The comments came fast. Neighbors, former coworkers, distant cousins I hadn't seen in decades. How could she? No daughter should ever do that to her mother. This generation has no respect. I sat on the couch, the screen glowing against my skin, reading each line like a wound reopening. Then came the message from Claire, my only friend since high school. We hadn't spoken often, but she'd always checked in. This is hard to watch. Maybe you could find a less aggressive way? Aggressive. That word sank deep, heavier than the rest. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That night, when I came upstairs, I found my bedding gone. The sheets, the pillows, even the blanket Agatha quilted for me, all of it missing. I checked the linen closet. Nothing. Then I saw it. Everything had been dumped on the hallway floor. No note. No explanation. Just a pile of fabric, folded poorly, shoved against the wall like someone had removed me from my own space. I stood there for a moment. My hands didn't shake. My throat didn't tighten. I simply knelt down and picked up the blanket. The edges were frayed from years of use. I ran my fingers over the stitching slowly. Quietly. Tenderly. I carried it to the living room. The couch was bare. I laid it across the cushions and sat down. From the hallway, I heard Varella's voice. Flat. Final. You're not welcome in that room anymore. I looked up at the ceiling. The fan rotated lazily overhead, its blades wobbling just slightly, like even it couldn't find balance in this house. The silence was thick. It wasn't peace. It was exile. The house used to feel too big. Now, it felt tight around my throat. I turned off my phone and opened my laptop. The document was already prepared. I attached the lease forgery and the deed, copies I'd scanned weeks ago. This time, I CC'd someone new, a probate lawyer Ellison recommended. No message. No explanation. Just facts. The next day, the lights in my room stayed off. The hallway was darker than usual. Even the dog, Isolde's golden retriever, had taken over Agatha's old bed, curled up on it like he belonged. I stood at the edge of the doorway and watched him sleep. His tail flicked, comfortable. Content. I wasn't angry. I was done being angry. I returned to the couch, pulled the blanket tighter, and tried to rest. The fabric smelled faintly of lavender. That night, I dreamt of a house where I could breathe. The next morning, Mom had her phone in hand before breakfast. She moved around the kitchen narrating every step of her life for her followers. Isolde stood beside her, adjusting the camera angle. Mom, just say what happened. Say she kicked you out. Mom looked into the lens, her voice soft. We're just trying to survive. I don't know why she's doing this to us. I didn't interrupt. Later, I overheard Isolde pacing in the kitchen. Her voice was louder than she thought. She thinks she's so smart. But no one's gonna remember her side when Mom's done telling it. I stepped into the doorway. Calm. Unmoving. They both froze. I looked at them the way a storm looks at the trees before it breaks. I don't need to be remembered, I said, steady and slow. I just need to be heard, by the right court. Their mouths moved, but no words came. I turned and walked away. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. She turned away before they could see her smile. The kitchen smelled like burnt onions and spite. I walked in slowly, holding my coffee cup in both hands like a shield. My mother was leaning against the counter, retelling the same crooked version of the story she'd been spreading for weeks. I just don't understand it, she told the neighbor, her voice soft and broken in just the right places. We did everything for her. And this is how she repays us. Eviction. She shook her head, not noticing me. Or maybe she did. Maybe pretending I wasn't there was part of the performance. Isolde leaned on the counter, arms crossed over her designer knockoff. Her voice had an edge when she turned to me. She won't actually do it, she said. She's all bark. The silence that followed was electric. That's when the plate flew. It wasn't aimed with any real intent, it spun in a messy arc, part dinner, part fury. A half-eaten slice of meatloaf and mashed potatoes landed across my chest, staining the cardigan Agatha gave me the year she passed. Get out, my mother screamed. Her fingers shook with rage, pointing at the door like she expected the house itself to throw me out. You want to be in charge? Then get your own place. The room went still. The neighbor's mouth hung open. Even Isolde froze. I didn't wipe the food off. I didn't raise my voice. I set my cup gently in the sink, turned around, and left. Upstairs, I went to the drawer where I kept everything that mattered, copies of the deed, the eviction notice, the police report, the fake lease with my forged signature. I placed them in a neat stack. When I came back down, Mom was still in the kitchen, her shoulders pulled high, jaw clenched. I laid the papers on the table between us. I am the sole legal owner of this property, I read aloud, each word like a gavel strike. All unauthorized residents are hereby ordered to vacate within 24 hours. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She wasn't used to losing ground in her own monologue. I didn't want this, I said. But you pushed. Isolde scoffed, grabbing her phone. This is insane. She's kicking out her own family. No, I said, my voice even. I'm removing people who don't respect my home, my name, or my grandmother's legacy. I went upstairs again, this time slower. Every step felt heavier than the last. When I reached the top, I heard Isolde mutter, she's not going through with this. She just wants attention. They still didn't believe me. That evening, I packed a small bag and drove to the rec center. It was the night of the fundraiser for the Agatha Morrow Women's Education Fund. I had donated anonymously, but when the organizer found out, they insisted I come and say a few words. I wore the same cardigan, still stained, still proud. Inside, the lights were soft, warm. People greeted me with kindness. No one asked about the drama back home. No one brought up Facebook. At the door, I saw her. Varela. Full makeup, heels, and a borrowed purse she always claimed was real leather. She walked up to the entrance like she belonged there. I'm here for the event, she told the young woman at the check-in table. Name? Varela Morrow. I'm her mother. The woman looked at the list. I'm sorry. You're not on the invitation. That must be a mistake. The woman glanced at a note beside my name. I was told to say this exactly, if you're not listed, you don't belong. My mother stood there, mouth trembling. She looked past the table, saw me across the room. Her eyes asked something. Mine answered nothing. I turned back toward the stage. They called my name. When I stepped up to the podium, my hands didn't shake. My voice didn't quiver. I looked out at the crowd, at the women who'd come with their daughters, at the men who'd brought flowers in memory of the strong women who raised them. Home, I began, is not where you're born. It's where you're allowed to stay. The room went silent. I could hear someone sniffle in the back. I didn't look. I wasn't speaking for them. I was speaking for me. For some of us, I continued, home was a place we had to fight to keep. Not just legally, but emotionally. Spiritually. Generationally. I paused, then smiled gently. Tonight, this house, this space, belongs to every woman who was told she didn't belong. Who was told her story wasn't worth believing. Who was told to sit down, stay quiet, or get out. The applause was quiet at first, then grew. Afterward, a reporter approached me. She held a notepad like she was already writing the headline. Will your family be joining you tonight? She asked. I didn't hesitate. My family is here, I said softly. The ones who stayed when I had nothing. Not the ones who left when I had something to protect. Outside, the air was cool. I didn't look back. And for once, I walked away without looking over my shoulder. A few weeks passed before the quiet began to feel natural. The house had changed in ways only silence could explain. There were no arguments echoing from the kitchen, no footsteps outside my door at midnight. Even the floorboards seemed softer under my feet. I walked barefoot through each room, touching the walls, reacquainting myself with the space that had once belonged to everyone but me. The dishwasher no longer carried taped notes on how I was loading it wrong. The air didn't reek of lemon cleaner, just faint lavender, freshly cut. The golden retriever was gone with Isolde. So was the noise. I repainted my room one morning. The color, warm ivory, spread smoothly over the old marks that once held my mother's fingerprints. I didn't paint to cover them. I painted to begin again. The next day, I moved her old reading lounge furniture out to the curb. That room, once her sanctuary of gossip magazines and silent judgment, became mine. I placed a yoga mat in the center, 2 candles by the window, and a photograph of Agatha framed in polished oak. I laid fresh lavender beside it. The smell filled the room, soft and steady, the way she used to hold my hands and whisper, breathe through it, Solène. One afternoon, I opened the mailbox and found a certified letter. Inside was a check from the sale of the empty property next door. I'd forgotten it was even listed. The ink shimmered faintly under the light, enough to seed the second round of scholarships for the foundation in Agatha's name. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same land my mother once wanted to sell for profit would now fund education for girls she would have called unrealistic dreamers. I smiled quietly, slowly. Healing came in strange currencies. Later that evening, I checked the house phone. I rarely did anymore. A blinking light meant voicemail. I pressed play. The voice was small, broken between sobs. "Soul, it's a sold. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just didn't know how to stop Mom. She said it was just to scare you. I swear, I didn't think she'd." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I really am." The message ended abruptly. I didn't call back. Forgiveness wasn't denial. It was distance. The next morning, I went grocery shopping. Something mundane, something ordinary. It felt almost foreign to do something so simple without anxiety buzzing under my ribs. As I turned into the produce aisle, I saw her. Varela. She stood near the oranges, a basket in her hand. Her hair, once ironed and styled, was gray at the roots. She looked smaller, diminished somehow, like someone had turned down her volume. For a moment, we just stared. Her lips parted. Maybe she meant to say hello. Maybe an apology. Or another story that would make her the victim. I'll never know, because she closed her mouth again and looked away. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I reached past her for the lemons, nodded politely, and walked on. In that quiet aisle, I realized something simple and true. I didn't win by hurting them. I won by not letting them hurt me anymore. When I got home, the air smelled faintly of rain and fresh paint. The floors gleamed in the afternoon light. I brewed tea and carried 2 mugs to the porch. Ellison arrived not long after. He didn't knock, he never did. He simply appeared with that calm energy that made the world slow down. We sat on the old porch swing Agatha built, its chains still squeaking on the left side. For a while, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The crickets outside filled the silence with their soft rhythm. Finally, he asked, "Do you feel better?" I looked out at the fading sky. The sun had dipped low enough to tint everything gold. "Not yet," I said quietly. "But I feel free. And that's something." He nodded, sipping his tea. "Freedom's heavier than people think." "I know," I said, smiling faintly. "It's supposed to be." When he left, I sat alone, the twilight pressing gently against the windows. The world outside moved on, cars in the distance, a dog barking somewhere down the street. Inside, the house breathed evenly, like it had finally exhaled. Later, I logged onto the scholarship website to update the fund records. Notifications blinked at the top of the page. One new application. The name caught my breath. Agatha S. She'd written in her essay about wanting to study architecture because her grandmother used to say, "Houses hold memories. Build them strong so people feel safe again." I read it twice, maybe 3 times. Then I smiled, a slow, quiet smile that reached deeper than relief. Maybe peace isn't loud. Maybe it just shows up in who we choose to protect next. Maybe the real inheritance isn't land or money, but learning when to stop asking for love from people who only know how to take. Have you ever had to choose peace over people who claim to be family? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories that hit where it hurts and heal where it matters.